Last year, more than 3 million tourists passed through Banff, and among those, over 60,000 were from a single country, Japan. It should be a great Canadian success story, but some people in Banff are concerned that with all those tourists, their paradise in the Rockies is changing, and for the worse.
Banff, Alberta, a picture postcard of snow-capped mountains, lakes and rivers, an accessible wilderness that we Canadians may take for granted, but that many other countries envy. It was established as Canada's first national park in 1885, and in order to bring people to Banff, the government allowed a certain number of leases on the land, as Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald put it, to encourage people of status to come to Banff to erect impressive buildings. Well, that's not exactly how it's turned out. The main street of Banff today is a confusion of stores selling souvenirs, novelty items, furs, and fast food, all in a wild medley of architectural styles. The famous beauty spot of the Rockies is beginning to look more like an eyesore. This is another view of Banff, as seen on Japanese television. It's a soap opera called Rice Curry, with Japanese and Canadian actors falling in love and doing all the things that people do in soap operas.
Banff, Canada, small town.
Oh, I know it.
But Rice Curry has helped to make Banff one of the most popular places in the world for Japanese tourists, a popularity that some residents of Banff are now beginning to regret. There's no question that the boom in Japanese tourism in Banff has helped to transform this town into a bustling tourist center. And for many Japanese, the star attraction of Banff isn't just the wilderness, not the mountains and the lakes, but a hotel. The Banff Springs Hotel was built 100 years ago in 1888, when Canadian railway hotels were meant to look like castles. It has seen good times and bad times, but thanks to the Japanese, recent times have been very good indeed. They come by the busloads, these tireless tourists with not a moment to spare, trying to crowd a tightly organized holiday into 1 week and eager to capture it all on camera. If anyone can take credit for bringing the Japanese to Banff, it's Ivor Petrak, the manager of the Banff Springs Hotel. 17 years ago, his hotel had 191 Japanese guests. This year, after all of Petrak's aggressive promotion in Japan, it will have 25,000.
1971, Banff was a sleepy village for 10 months of the year, and a fair summer resort for 2 months of the year. Everything closed down after Labor Day. They boarded the windows and went down to Arizona to spend the rest of the year. Now it is just bustling town 12 months of the year.
It's true that Banff is no longer a sleepy village. It's also true that large numbers of Japanese tourists have changed the town. Most of them speak little English, and they have little reason to. Japanese signs can be found just about everywhere. Merchants wishing to do business with the Japanese are, naturally, hiring Japanese-speaking staff. Leading the way, the Banff Springs Hotel is now offering Japanese lessons to its staff. These young hotel employees may not learn how to discuss the rise and fall of the yen on international money markets, but they will be able to take a reservation for a table of 6. As far as Hap Freeman of the Chamber of Commerce is concerned, the Japanese tourist is big business.
They spend probably more money per capita than any other group of people that I've seen. I have seen estimations as high as $5,000 a person on expenditures when they make one of these trips.
And they spend it on what? What are they buying?
They spend it on anything you can think of. They love Canadian things. Furs are very, very a big commodity. Such things as carvings, artwork, that sort of thing.
Of course, it's not works of art that tourists spend their money on. Japanese tourists, like most others, seem inclined towards souvenirs of Canada made in Hong Kong or Taiwan. But the point is, Japanese tourists, more than any others, are buying.
That the Japanese are the kinds of travelers they are also has a great deal to do with international economics. Because of Japan's balance of payments problem, the Japanese government encourages its citizens to travel abroad. Last year, about 7 million of them did, and it's hoped that in 3 years that number will be 10 million. And when people from Japan come to a place like Banff, because of the strong yen, they also have a great deal of money to spend. In fact, the average Japanese tourist spends about twice as much as the average American. Now, you'd think that people in Banff would be delighted with all of that. Unfortunately, that's not exactly the way it is.
Banff is starting to look more like a town in Japan than a town site within the Canadian National Park.
Brent Baker owns the family jewelry store on Banff Avenue.
And I think people are coming here expecting to come to a Canadian National Park and finding they're probably in a little Tokyo. And it's just distressing to them. They haven't come here to have that experience.
Brent Baker's store is next door to one of the most successful tourist operations on Banff Avenue, the OK Store. And one of its owners is a Japanese television star, Kiyosa Ohashi. Ohashi is always referred to as the Johnny Carson of Japan. 8 years ago, when the Fifth Estate visited Tokyo, Ohashi told us why he was looking forward to opening a store in Banff.
As far as Western Canada is concerned, the Canadians are nice to Japanese, and most of all, they are not prejudiced, racially prejudiced as the other people, as other white people, I should say.
In Banff today, racial prejudice is not something that anybody wants to talk about. Toro Miyazoe, the manager of the OK stores in Canada, was reluctant to give us an interview. He's an active member of the Chamber of Commerce, considers himself a good citizen, and couldn't see why some people should resent the friendly Japanese invasion, which simply means more prosperity for everybody in Banff. One reason for that resentment is a way of doing business that's common enough in Japan and elsewhere. When tour buses stop at the OK store and others, it's part of an arrangement with the tour companies, usually negotiated in Japan. And that means a payoff by the store. A commission is given to the tour companies who arrange for buses to stop at OK's outlet in Banff. The tour guide gets part of that commission, and the bus driver receives a tip for his kindness in double parking in front of the store. This kind of sweetheart deal upsets many of the merchants in Banff, who think it's just not the Canadian way of doing things. One of the merchants who has resisted paying commissions is Yost Storm, the owner of Quest, a Canadian handicraft store.
Well, sure, I have been approached by the tourists.
In what way?
The tour guide who asked me how much do I get when I put the tour bus in front of your door.
So in other words, if I bring my bus from
right.
Tokyo here for the afternoon, how much of a commission am I going to be paying?
That's right. And so I told him nothing, and I asked him for his name, and he walked out.
Gordon Kadota is co-owner of the OK stores. He says that the commission system is no more un-Canadian than the kind of reception he got when he first came to the park.
When we first went into Banff, we leased a particular location, and there were still tenants there. So we offered to continue to lease this place to them, because this was not the entire premises that we leased. And we were told, where did you come from? So I said, well, I come from Vancouver. And he said, no, I mean, where did you really come from? So I said, I really come from Vancouver. Well, where were you born? So I said, well, I was born in New Westminster, the suburbs of Vancouver. Well, where did your parents come from? Well, my parents came from Japan, 50 years ago or 60 years ago. That's what I mean. You're from Japan. What would you think if I opened up a store in Tokyo? So I said, I wouldn't feel anything. You're most free to do that.
Whatever the undercurrents in Banff's business community, there's a larger issue at stake here. Mike McIver is an environmentalist who works as grounds foreman at the Banff Centre for Continuing Education. To McIver, the Japanese aren't the problem. The problem is the dreams of developers who are transforming a national park site into a cheap and noisy tourist centre.
I think what is happening, particularly in the town site of Banff, is a disaster. Nobody has to come to a national park to buy furs. The junk shops that peddle made in Hong Kong souvenirs. There are things like that that I think are totally out of place in Banff. But I think what has happened is, as that urban frenzy, there's now a pervasive urban hum from the town of Banff that never used to be here.
Has it hurt Banff as far as you're concerned?
I think so.
In what way?
And then not the Japanese business, but the increase of people, the increase of the tourists, the buses. You can't move anymore in the summer.
If Banff has changed, who's to blame?
I think we do it to ourselves. Promoting, more promoting.
Tom McMillan agrees. He's Minister for the Environment, the man responsible for protecting Canada's national parks.
I think there is a fine line between a interesting, romantic little parks town and a tacky little tourist trap. I don't think we've gone beyond it, but boy, I think we've come pretty close.
The people who like Banff the way it is and want even more of it say that the tourist business is not harming the park. They say the mountains and the woods in all their majesty are still there. You can even see mountain goat and elk without getting out of your car. And there's enough of both town and nature for everyone to enjoy. And on Banff Avenue, the band keeps playing, and the cash registers are ringing up more sales than ever.
If our interest is to protect the environment of the park, I'm a firm believer in that. And whatever has to be done to make sure that the environment is protected, I think should be done and enforced, and of course ensure that people observe those regulations, whatever they may be. But we cannot forget the fact that we, in other words, Canada, as a nation, as provinces, as a private sector, have promoted into the United States, have promoted into, of course, Japan and in England and Europe. We're asking these people to come, and they're coming.